Maya sat in her dimly lit studio, surrounded by canvases in various states of incompletion. The air felt thick, heavy with the scent of dried paint and stale coffee. She stared at the empty canvas before her, the stark white glaring back like a taunt. Each time she lifted her brush, doubt gripped her wrist like an invisible chain, and her hand would falter, leaving nothing but hesitation. She sighed and threw her brush aside, frustration bubbling up like a tide threatening to drown her. Every attempt to create felt forced, mechanical. And each day the weight of expectations from critics, friends, and even herself grew heavier. It wasn't just the fear of failure. It was the fear of never being able to create anything meaningful again. While rummaging through an old box in search of inspiration, she stumbled upon a dusty, leather-bound sketchbook she hadn't touched in years. Flipping through the pages, she found sketches from her childhood, back when drawing was effortless and full of joy. Her fingers stopped at a peculiar drawing, a detailed door, carved with intricate symbols, leading into darkness. It was a doorway to somewhere she had imagined as a child, a place where creativity had no limits. She had forgotten all about it. That night, Maya's sleep was restless. Dreams blurred together like watercolors, and she found herself standing in front of the door from her sketchbook, its wooden surface alive with swirling patterns. The air around her vibrated with a strange energy. She reached out hesitantly, but just as her fingers brushed the door, a loud creak echoed through the dream, and she woke with a start. Breathing heavily, she sat up, her pulse racing as if she had been running. It was just a dream, she thought, until she noticed something out of place on her nightstand, an old iron key, cold to the touch. It wasn't hers. As she held it up to the dim morning light, she saw that the key was engraved, with symbols that matched those on the door, in her drawing. Curiosity mixed with fear as she returned to her studio, key in hand. There, in the dim corner behind her easel, the walls seemed different. She blinked, and for a moment, the door she had drawn all those years ago appeared, shimmering faintly as if made of smoke and moonlight. She could hear a faint whisper from beyond it, calling her name, a voice she could almost recognize, though she couldn't place it. Driven by a sudden and unexplainable urge, Maya stepped closer, her heart pounding in her chest. She raised the key to the door, feeling a strange heat radiating from the metal. As the key slid into the lock, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. She hesitated, fear battling with the thrill of the unknown, before finally turning the key. With a shuddering groan, the door creaked open, revealing a swirling vortex of colors and light beyond. A gust of wind pulled at her, stronger than any she had felt before, and she stumbled forward, barely managing to catch herself. The studio seemed to vanish in an instant, as if it had been swallowed up by the swirling world beyond. Maya found herself tumbling through a chaotic blur of colors, feeling weightless as if falling through a storm of emotions. Each color pulsed with its own rhythm, and strange shapes darted around her like shadows, whispering words she couldn't understand. As the intensity built, she braced herself for impact, her body tightening in anticipation. Then, with a sudden and violent jolt, everything stopped. The colors parted like curtains, and Maya landed roughly on the ground, gasping for breath. She was no longer in her studio, but in a place that defied reality itself, a landscape, both beautiful and terrifying, where the sky shifted from dusk to dawn in mere seconds, and the ground glowed with a dim, otherworldly light. Before she could gather her thoughts, a shadow loomed over her. Maya looked up to see a figure standing on a nearby ridge, backlit by a shifting sky of gold and purple. The figure was tall, draped in a long coat, and held a staff that glowed faintly at its tip. The figure's eyes seemed to pierce through the air, locking onto her with an intensity that made her shiver. The figure took a step forward, and the ground trembled slightly. "You've come," a deep voice rumbled, carrying an edge that hinted at weariness. "I've been waiting."